Okay, good night, Shabbos. We welcome everyone to Masechta Moed Katan. Masechta Moed Katan is exactly what it sounds like, Moed Katan, the Katan of the Moed, or what we call Chol HaMoed, the Chol of the Moed. And by and large, the Chol HaMoed is similar to Yantif and not similar to Yantif, based upon the following pasuk. The pasuk says, Devarim Tes Zayin Pasuk Ches. In Dvarim Tes Zayin Pasuk Ches, guys, listen to this. This is classic Torah Shebal Peh. Again, if you have a chumash, Dvarim Tes Zayin Pasuk Ches. If you want to get a chumash, if not, you have the size of the Gemara. It may not be on the side of the Gemara, guys. But so listen to what the pasuk says. Sheishes Yamim Toichal Matzos. 6 days you should eat matzos. Ubayom Hashvi Atzeres Lashem Elokecha. And on the seventh day, Atzeres, it should be a stopping. It should be Atzeres that you can't do malacha. Lashem Elokecha. So the Gemara in Chagiga makes a Gemara Chagiga Yudches makes a hekesh between 6 days and the seventh day. Just like the seventh day we can't do work. Again, the seventh day of Pesach is Kodesh. So too, all 6 days are Kodesh and we can't do work. So if that's the case, you would say, just like the seventh day you can't do any work except Eichel Nefesh. So to Chol HaMoed, I would say you can't do any work except Eichel Nefesh. Therefore, it says Hashavi. Hashavi is also in all malacha, but not the other 6 days. In other words, even though it's asa b'malacha, there's still a gather of malacha that's permitted. Because it says hashvi'i, the shvi'i, to limit the all malacha except Eichel Nefesh to the seventh day. But the 6 days that are asa machmis the hekesh to the seventh day, that is not as forbearing. It's not as much. So the question is so what can you do? What can't you do? And be aware, there's a huge machlokes rishonim whether it's asa deraisa or derabanan. In other words, the Gemara in Yudches quotes a pasuk. Is this pasuk deraisa, meaning the ism malacha on Chol HaMoed is a deraisa the kachiv, or it's a derabanan, and the pasuk is rak asmach de ba'alma. The Chachamim found a smach in the Torah to support their position. So Rashi on Daf Yomi Aleph Amid Beis Dibur Mascha Ella says it's the Raisa. There's a steer in Taisus. Taisus and Daf Ches says it's the Raisa, and the Chagiga says it's the Rabbanon. And the lashon of the Rambam, Chol HaMoed Afal Pi, even though Shaloi Nema by Shabbasayin, even though it doesn't say on Chol HaMoed the din of Shabbasayin, meaning to rest from work, Hayil v'nikra mikra kodesh, since it's called mikra kodesh, Vayehu zman chagiga b'migdash, and it's the time that you bring the chagiga in the Beis HaMikdash, asa b'asiyas malacha, it's asa to do malacha. Guys, we spoke this out beautifully, why women do not go ahead and do work on Rosh Chodesh. If you might remember, we spoke at a Shagas Aryeh. I'll remind you that Bisman Habayis, no one worked on Rosh Chodesh. Why didn't anyone work on Rosh Chodesh? Because they brought the carbon for them. They brought the carbon tzibah for them. So therefore, they didn't work. After the destruction of the Beis HaMikdash, they kept it in place because of the woman, because of the Maisa of the Egel, that they did not give over their jewelry. They were rewarded in keeping the initial Isser. But once we took away the carbon completely, fellas, there was no Isser anymore of Malacha on Rosh Chodesh. So he's quoting over here the same Svara. By Huzman Chagiga Migdash. Therefore, since Chol HaMoed, we bring a carbon, you don't do work. Asa b'asiyas Malacha, Kadesh Le'yeh Kishar Yemei Chayil, She'en Ben Kedusha Klal. That it shouldn't be Meichayil, that there's no Kedusha at all. Notice, guys, the Rambam is not bringing out pasuk at all of Sheishes Yom and Toichel Matzos, Ubiyom Hashvi Yetzeres Yelechem. V'oisa by Malacha Asura, says the Rambam, Makin Oisei Makis Mardis, you'll only give him Makis the Rabbanon if they should Isru Midirei Seifrim, right? The Isru is Direi Seifrim. So that's the lashon of the Rambam. In Hilchos Yontif, there it is, Perik Zayin. So as an introduction, we have based upon what we saw, it's asa to do work on Chol Hamoed, whether it's the Raisa the Rabbanon is the Machlokes Rishonim, but you can't do it. Now, we do know, even if it's an Issa the Raisa, we know there's the Hashvi to limit all work. But there is a heter of Malacha. What is that heter? In other words, who decided what's work and what's not work? That was given over to Chachamim. Whatever the Chachamim decided, that's work, is work and not. And the kud is, the key word here, guys, is tircha. Anything that's hard to do, that is asa. Anything that's hard to do, that is asa. Tircha is asa. Tircha is asa. That's the guideline. What's the heter? If it's a davar or ovid. Now, if it's not a davar or ovid, meaning you're not going to take a monetary loss, meaning not a profit loss, a principal loss. If you're not going to take a loss of principal, then any malacha is not permitted, even if it's not tircha. But b'makoim davar avud, it's permitted to do malacha, provided it's not tircha. Tircha is out even b'makom, even in a place of davar avid losing your principal. Tircha would be asar. So that is the guideline. That's the guideline of this mesechta. It's tircha and davar avid. There's ma'asum and there's different things. One more. Since I have your attention, one more geschmaka the hair. My son Yehonason told me that Rav Yaakov Kamenetsky, Yaakov explains there's a shita that Amir La'akum is more severe by Yontif than it is by Shabbos. Everyone says Amir La'akum, saying to a guy to do malacha on Shabbos is a shvus. There's an opinion, however, by Yontif it's asa. What's that predicated upon? Listen to the Tif guy. Guys, by Shabbos, says Rabbi Yaakov, it's not pshat that it's issa malacha. It's pshat, it's an issa on the person. The person can't do the malacha. We are mitzvah not to work. The chiyuv is on us. Therefore, a guy who's not mitzvah, for us to tell him to work is only the rabbanon. By Yontif, it's not pshat, it's an issa gavra. It's the whole day, it's asa b'malacha. It's an issa malacha. If it's an issa malacha on the day, not the person, then Amir La'akum could be asa deraisa. It's an issa on the day. In other, the day is asa. It's not an issa on the chefza, it's a gavra. It's an issa on the chefza of the day. If the day is asa, regardless who's doing the malacha, it's not permitted. That would be Rabbi Yaakov, and that would be an understanding of why the Chachamim can decide what's malacha and what's not malacha. If it was an issa gavra, it's an issa on the person. If it's an issa on the day, then the Chachamim are given what is considered malacha and what's not considered malacha. They're given a little guidelines of what's asa. That's I think a nice hakdama to this masechta. So let's begin. And again, remember we're dealing with an agricultural society. It's a society wide of farmers, and therefore a lot of the examples of what's usher is based upon what was around in those days. Of course, we'd have to go ahead and parallel them to our days. What exactly will be considered usher, what be considered mutter. I would think clearly Chol Hamoed is one of the days where clearly many people, including myself, do not know the halachas well, and many people do things that are not necessary to be done. And many people are over on this of working Chol Hamoed. Chol Hamoed is again and that seems to be like you had Yontif and then boom. Okay, let's see the Mishnah. Mashkin Beis Hashlachim. Okay, let's identify two fields. One is called the Beis Hashlachim. One's called Beis Habal. Beis Habal is a field that does not need irrigation. It's naturally irrigated. Beis Hashlachim is one that needs irrigation. For example, if it's on a mountain, the water is going to run down. You have to irrigate it. If, however, it's in a valley, the water is going to run. It doesn't have to be irrigated. That would be an example of Beis Hashlachim and Beis Habal. So, Mashkin Beis Hashlachim b'Moed. On Moed, on the Chol Hamoed, you're able to go ahead and irrigate it. Take water and irrigate the field. Uba Shvius, and Shvius you also can do it. The Gemara is going to say what's the Chiddush of Shvius. Bein b'ma'ayin sheyotze b'tchila, whether it's a fountain that you're using for the first time. Now, if it's a fountain that you're using for the first time, you're worried that it might break. In other words, the fountain might flow into the canal. Since it's not been used yet, the canal, the banks of the canal may go ahead and fall in, and you may end up being matriach tirchi yisera fixing it. We're not worried about that. When it's a davar of it, because if it's a base hashlachin, and if you're not going to irrigate your field, fellas, you're going to take a loss. So right away, we're introduced in the first case to the two nekudos that I spoke out, the Isser of what of Tircha and the Heter of Davar Ovid. So Beis HaShlachin, fellas, which would be a Davar Ovid, which you would take a monetary loss because you need to be irrigated. And what? And it's not a Tircha because you're going ahead and you're using you're not taking a kli and pouring the water in, but you're using a fountain to do it where the water is flowing by itself. And even though it might fall in if it wasn't used, the Makam Davar Ovid will go ahead. Since the Tircha is not there yet, we're not worried about coming to Tircha. Right now, the Tircha is not in. It's a fountain. The Tircha is not there yet. Which would seem to be a Davar Pashit. If it's a Ma'ayin that you used already, the Chiddush is the second case. Ma'ayin that you used already is not such a Chiddush. The Ma'ayin that you didn't use is a Chiddush. Aval ein mashkin, you can't go ahead and irrigate. Loim and make a shamim, fellas, you're going to have to go ahead, take water from rainwater and throw it in. That would be a tircha. But loim mimei hakilun, and not from mimei hakilun. It's also a type of well. Around, you have trees. You would dig around the tree of the vineyards. You would dig ugyos, like that the water should collect there. That is a tircha. That already is a tircha by digging like that. So let's see some Rashis. Okay, this very long Rashi, I spoke it out about the pasuk in the Gemara in Chagiga, and therefore let's skip to Ma'ayin Shiyasa B'tchila. Go down parallel to the Gemara 5 lines down. Ma'ayin Shiyasa B'tchila, the Akshav Maskel Linvaya. Now it's going ahead for the first time. Linvaya, it's going ahead for the first time to flow. It hasn't been established its root. That's been there for a long time. Right? Why can't you use it? You have extra tircha of using this mega shaman. So ma'ayin that you're using for the first time. I said it right the first time. Ma'ayin using it for the first time. That's a chiddush. That you're not first time, that's not such a chiddush. But again, therefore, since again it's not. What's the rule of thumb? It's a davar of it because it's a beis hashlachin, and it's not a tircha, and we're not worried about future tircha. You could do it. Once you get into tircha, which would be digging around the tree, vineyard, or going ahead and taking water with a deli, with a bucket, and pouring it in, that would not be permitted. Afil b'makom hefsid. Rabbi Lezben is the Moed. The Amma was it was an Amma wide and an Amma deep. Therefore, it was a canal. We don't make a canal on the Moed ubashvias in the Shemitah year. The Chacham Moed oisnes the Amma betchila b'shvias. On Chol Moed, not in Shvias yet. Again, we have the Shemitah let's hold off on that. Shemitah year, we'll get into that. But right now, he's masking on Chol Moed, not because the Tircha Yisera digging this ditch. This Amma ditch would be what? Would be Tircha. These are things that you can do on the Moed. Things that got ruined over the winter or not, you can fix on the Moed. You can go ahead and clean out the wells of water in Shosarabim. You can correct the roads, and the streets, and the mikvahs, and the Gemara will say, what does that come to include? You go ahead and be able to put lime by the graves that the Kahanim should not become tamei. You could even go out of Chol Moed to remove the klayim from the fields. So again, a few examples of exactly the rule of thumb. Again, the two for this Masechta, the two words, Davar Ovid and Tircha. Davar Ovid and Tircha. The heter of Davar Ovid and the Tircha, that's the guideline mat of the Chachamim, what they permitted to do on Chol Moed. Says Gemara, a ma'ayin that is being used for the first time. The Osil and Pule, the banks of the canal that it's going to flow into, may go ahead and fall in, and that would lead for you to clean it up. Nonetheless, mashkin, you could go ahead and use to go ahead and irrigate a beis hashlachin. Ma'ayin shleyotzim etchila, a ma'ayin that already has been used. We are not worried about falling in. Like Asilan Pule, me boy, why are you telling me that something the Mishnah never? Rabbi wrote the Mishnah in such a concise way. He would never go ahead and tell me something that's unnecessary. So he told me a fountain that using for the first time you could use kolshkin, a fountain that has already been used, that's been ruggle and been accustomed and been established as a viable vehicle of bringing the water to irrigation. Why should you go ahead and have to tell me that? Sami Yitzchak, you have to tell me that. Itana ma'ayin, why? Itana ma'ayin shiyatzim etchila. If you would just tell me a ma'ayin that's being used for the first time, havamina hachahu de beis hashlachin in beis habaloi mishum de asilan pule. Because why? It may come to go ahead and fall in. So therefore, beis hashlachin yes, a beis habal no. Avul ma'ayin shleyatzim etchila, but a ma'ayin that you have used before, you're accustomed to le'asilan pule, that it may not come fall in. Ema filu beis habal nami. I might think a beis habal, which is not a davar of it because it has natural irrigation. I would think you could do as well. Kamash malon. So the Gemara gives a very interesting teretz. Guys, what's the Gemara's kasha? You have a field that's called, let's contrast two fields. A beis hashlachin that requires irrigation, a beis habal that doesn't. And you're telling me a din, when it comes to irrigating this field, you can use two means, or whether it's that you used it already or you didn't use it already. Both are acceptable. So the Gemara is a kasha. If you're only discussing beis hashlachin, why do you have to tell me one that? Why do you have to tell me one that? Why do you have to tell me one that you're used to that works already? Madach, one that you're using for the first time, that there's a possibility it may not work because the banks are going to fall in. You could use certainly one that you're not worried about that you could use. What is Gemara's teretz? It's not a chiddush in beis hashlachin, guys. It's a chiddush in beis habal. If you would have just told me one and not the other, you know what I would have said? When it comes to beis habal, the only one you can't use is the one that you're using for the first time. But the one that you're accustomed to using, I would say by the beis habal you could use. Why? There's nothing to worry about. Kamash malon, the heter is of using the one you're accustomed to is only by the beis hashlachin and not by the beis habal. So it's a chiddush in the beis habal, in the chiddush of the one that does not require irrigation, that you can't use it, despite the fact that it's no sweat off your back whatsoever. Since it's not a davar ovid, there's no heter of the chachamim to do it on Chol Moed, despite the fact there's no tircha. Again, since it's not a davar ovid, because it has natural irrigation and it's not going to go to waste, therefore you can't do it on Chol Moed. That's the chiddush in the Mishnah. Guys, you good? Again, these are terminology you have to get used to. It's the opening Masechta, the terminology you get used to it. Davar ovid, tircha. Okay, so Baruch Hashem, that's what we got so far. Says the Gemara Vaita. Now the Gemara now just goes tangentially to figure out Lashonis. Okay. Listen, I have Dr. Hilly just joined. I'll cover Dr. Hilly, who's my guy. I have to repeat it again. Okay, so I'm repeating the Mishnah again about what's going on over here. We're dealing with Masechta Moed Katan. Masechta Moed Katan deals with Chol Moed. We're saying in Chol Moed, we had a machlekes rishonim that Israel of Malach and Chol Moed was Asa the Raisa the Rabbanon. Even if it's Asa the Raisa, we know that it's not the same as the regular Moed because it's Chol Moed, and we brought a pasuk, and therefore the Chachamim went ahead and decided it's up to them to decide what's permitted, what's not permitted. We're using two key points. For something to be permitted, it has to be at this point in time a davar ha'avad, something that you would lose your principle. So if your land is going to go to waste because your land requires natural irrigation, it doesn't have natural irrigation, you have to irrigate it. And if you don't irrigate it, it'll go to waste. You're permitted to go ahead and irrigate it on Chol Moed. However, in the irrigation itself, you're limited. You're limited to one that will not be a tremendous tircha, one that will not be troublesome. Something that's troublesome, you will not be able to do. So you'll be able to take a bucket and start going in your field. But to go ahead and open up a mayan that has a natural stream, that you'll be able to use. Even if the possibility is that the banks may fall in because you're using it the first time, you could use it. Okay, that's what we said so far. Says the Gemara. Well, my mashma the high beis hashlochin lishna did sachusahi. How do you know beis hashlochin is a lashon of tzachusa? It means thirsty. Beis hashlochin was saying the field is thirsty. It doesn't have a natural irrigation, so it's a thirsty field. How do we know it's a lashon of thirsty? The chsiv, it says, "V'ata oyef v'yageya," you are tired and exhausted. U'mitaraminon ves mishalhei v'loyi. Now take the lashon mishalhei. We know by now a ches and a hey, guys, are interchangeable. Right, are interchangeable. So you take the lashon of mishale, it becomes mishalche and veloyi. So now you are thirsty and you are exhausted. My mashman the high beis habal lishna de misvusahi. How do you know beis habal is the lashon of misivusahi? So he the chsiv kiev al bacha besula. If a bacha will go ahead and live with a besula, and we take aminon and we translate that are kamo de mitoisiv. Mitaisa with lashon of yishuv, guys. Remember, the tough is interchangeable. Lashon of yishuv, oilim ulam im besulta. That how at peace the ulam, the young boy, sits with his wife the besula. Yisyasvam begabeich benayat. So too, we Hakadosh Baruch Hu begabeich should sit with you, your sons. So you see that the lashon of Baal is the lashon of yishuv. It's a lashon of settled. So just like the bacha is settled with his besula, Hashem should settle with us, and the water is settled on the field because why? It's a beis habal. It settles there. You don't need irrigation. That's the lashon of Baal. You don't need irrigation. It is there, guys. How we doing? We're good. Okay. Now Mantana again. Atuna kudis tirchanat b'makom has b'makom davar ovid. Yes. Mantana the pseida in harvachalo. Dafka, if you're going to lose your principal, can you go to work? But saving a profit, not. In other words, when the Mishnah says that you can irrigate a beis hashlachin, it means you're going to lose your field. It doesn't mean you're going to lose the profits from the year. It means the field itself is going to be ruined. The principal, the field itself, not the Paris. The Paris, the principal itself will be ruined. So therefore, how do you know that the makom pseida in havachalo? And next, va'afil b'makom pseida. Mitrach nami tarchinon, and even b'makom seder, you're limited to no tircha. Again, clear as day. Gemara speaks out clear as day. Amar Rav Huna, who's the Tana of our Mishnah? In other words, who's the Tana of the Mishnah? Those two components. Shvai to the side of your Gemara. Two components. One, it has to be a dava ovid, and two, it has to be no tircha. Those are mamish, the rule of thumb that goes throughout this Masechta. Once you get that down, write that in the Mishnah, beis hashlachin. Right, beis hashlachin means that what? It's a davar avud, and then you write that aval ein mashkin lo yimei geshamim because it's a tircha. Even though it's a davar avud, avalei, it says in the Mishnah lo yimei geshamim because it's a tircha. So you see the two dinim in the Mishnah. You see the din of davar avud in the Mishnah, and you see the din of tircha in the Mishnah. They're both there. They're both clearly there. So Amar Rav Huna, who is this Tana? It's Rabbi Eliezer ben Yaakov. The Tana is Rabbi Eliezer ben Yaakov. Ditnan. Now, it behooves us to always say the Mishnah is Rabbi Eliezer ben Yaakov because we know the Mishnah is Rabbi Eliezer ben Yaakov kav v'naki. They're what? They're not many, but naki, they're clean. So the halacha is like him. But anyway, nonetheless, it's not going to be like him. Why? So what does he say? Rabbi Eliezer ben Yaakov, you can go ahead and from, let's say you have water underneath one tree, on Chol Moed, you're able to go ahead and be Maishachit, go ahead and I guess make a little ditch, not too hard, to bring it to another tree. Provided you don't go ahead and irrigate the whole field. Now, irrigating the whole field, this is a beis habal. This is a beis habal. So l'chayra, Rabbi Eliezer ben Yaakov would be the Tana of the Mishnah. Why? Because if you would irrigate the whole field, guys, you would make a profit. Guys, the beis habal does not require. So if you're irrigating it, you'll be making a profit. Yeah. So what do you hear? You hear from the words of Eliezer ben Yaakov, the din of the Mishnah, that only if you lose your principal, but not if you go ahead and lose your profit. Because again, it says over here, losing the profit will be the whole field. Now, what didn't you hear? You didn't hear the din of tircha. Again, we need a Tana to tell us two dinim. We need a Tana to tell us the din of only a davar avud, and we need a Tana to tell me, but b'makom tircha not. All I heard from Eliezer ben Yaakov, guys, was b'makom of profit, you don't do it. Because he said Beis Habal, you can't do it for. So Fred the Gemara, Eimit the Shamalei, Rabbi Eliezer Harvacha Deloi. Tircha b'makom b'sedim Shamalei. We heard from Rabbi Eliezer, you can't davar of it. That I did here. It's got to be a davar of it. It can't be from the fact that you can't do it to a Beis Habal. You can't do it to an irrigated field. We see it can't be what a profit. It has to be a davar neva. It has to be losing the principle like a Beis Shlachim. Tircha b'makom b'sedim Shamalei. But do you hear that b'makom b'seda you can't be matriach? You don't hear that for him. So therefore, he can't be the Tan of our Mishnah. Elo Lashon Charata. He's not the Tan of our Mishnah. El Omer of Papa Hamani. Who's the Tan of our Mishnah? Is Rabbi Yehuda. The Tan of our Mishnah is Rabbi Yehuda. The Tanya. Ma'ayin hayoitza mitchila. A ma'ayin that is being used for the first time. Mashkemi menu. You could go ahead and irrigate. Afilu sada beis habal. Divrei Reb Meir. So Reb Meir can't be the Tan of our Mishnah, guys. Because Reb Meir is permitting, if you're not matriach, he's permitting a filu harvacha. He's saying a beis habal which doesn't require irrigation, you could do it. So Reb Meir can't be the Tan of a Mishnah. Again, the buzzword of the Mishnah that I told you to write down. Beis hashlachim is a makom hefsid. Beis habal is a harvacha. So therefore, he can't be the Tan of a Mishnah. He's permitting a canal being used for the first time, a fountain used for the first time, a feel in a Beis Habal, which is what? Not a Dovra Avod. Not losing something. Ella must be Rabbi Yehuda Oimer. This is the Tana. Who is the Tana Rabbi Yehuda? Rabbi Papa says it must be him. What does he say? Ein mashkin elasada Beis Hashlachim shecharva. You only can go ahead and irrigate a Beis Hashlachim that you're going to take a loss. Shecharva that what? Was destroyed. Now, says now 1 second. Don't close the books yet. Rabbi Lezben Azai Omer loikach, neither one. You can't use a mashkin, neither one. You can't use either one. You can't use a ma'ayin, this field or that field. I'm Rabbi Yehuda. Layifna adam ames hamayim. A person should turn an ames hamayim v'yashkel v'ginasa l'chuvasle b'cholish al-moed. Now, my charva. What exactly is a charva? If you're going to tell me that Rabbi Yehuda permits you to go ahead by a Beis HaShlachim that's totally ruined, to open up a water, lamali the mashakele, if it's totally ruined, why are you irrigating it? If it's a churva, meaning nothing is going to grow there, what heter is there in Chol Hamoed to go ahead and irrigate it? Obviously not. So it must be Elo Amar Abaya shecharvo mi'ayin zeh. That meaning this ma'ayin isn't good. The field is aggerable, but the ma'ayin, the source for the Beis HaShlachim, again, it always needs a source. The Beis HaShlachim does not have a natural source, so it needs a source, and the source is charva. The field is fine if it's irrigated. The source for the field is ruined. Therefore, you can go ahead and do another one. So now, let's go back to it, guys. Let's go back to the words of Rabbi Yehuda. When it gets wide, 3 lines down. Rabbi Yehuda, ma'ayin, 2 lines down. Ma'ayin ayoytza b'tchila, a ma'ayin, that what? That you're being used for the first time. Mashkin mimenu afilu sada beis habal divrei Meir. Rabbi Yehuda Omer, a mashkin ela sada beis hashlachin, shecharva. So let's go through it now. It's a beis hashlachin. It's a Beis HaShlachim, meaning it needs irrigation. And that means it's a Davra Avod. And I can go ahead and use the Ma'ayin. That wasn't used one, because it was destroyed. Why can I use the Ma'ayin and not a bucket? Because the Ma'ayin is not a tircha and a bucket is. So Rabbi Yehuda is the Tan of a Mishnah. He fills in blows blank. Guys, we got to fill in 2 boxes, 2 blanks, right? What are the 2 blanks we need? Davar Avod and Tircha. Davar Avod, he says only Beis HaShlachim, not Beis Habal. And Tircha, he says only Al Yidei Ma'ayin and not. Good? So he's the Tan of the Mishnah. Now let's explain Rabbi Eliezer ben Azariah, what he meant. Now, so it says, so Rabbi Eliezer ben Omer, Loi kach v'loi kach. What does that mean? Loi shana charav ma'ayin. No difference whether the ma'ayin was destroyed. Loi shana, loi charav ma'ayin. It wasn't destroyed. Ma'ayin sheyatza mitchila loi. Right? Ma'ayin doesn't make a difference. The charav ma'ayin of loi shana ma'ayin. Whether if you have a one if you have one that is usable and you don't want to use it, you want a new one, can't use the new one. If you have one that's not usable, but you have a new one, you can't use it. In other words, Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah is worried if you use it for the first time, that the banks may fall in, that would lead to tircha. That's what he's worried about. So he's not the Tan of our Mishnah, because he wouldn't allow a ma'ayin that you're using for the first time to be used for a beis hashlachin. So who's the Tan of our Mishnah? Rabbi Yehuda, who lets a beis hashlachin, meaning davra avud, and a ma'ayin shiyasim etchila, because there's no tircha. Let's see Rashi. Rashi about 10 lines up. Shecharva ma'ayin zev yotzle ma'ayin acher. Shecharav mayana shirigila lishtais mimenu. It's been destroyed, the fountain, the source that you usually use. The kimin shirila lishtais, since you usually use it, ilay mashkala achshav islap seidi seira. If you're not going to use it, the field is used to it, and now you don't have its source, you're going to take a davar of it, you're going to take a loss. Afilu hachi, nonetheless, like Sharav Yehuda, ela ma'ayin sheyotzalu la, a ma'ayin that would go out to it, the lav tirchihi, avol me geshamim, but to take a bucket and put it in rainwater, ume kiloin, or to take a bucket and put it in a well, the tirchahu, that's a tircha, like shari afilu lebeis hashlachim. Right? So beautiful, both boxes are filled in. You check both boxes. Geschmack, guys, yeah? Geschmack. For Oid Chazina, the come Rabbi Yehuda, Layifna Ma'ayin, Rabbi Yehuda said another din, you shouldn't go ahead and take Amasamayin, V'yishka, Alma Yisid, like Shari Rabbi Yehuda, Tirch Yisera, Alma Masnisim, Rabbi Yehuda, now, why not Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah? Because he doesn't let you use Ma'ayin that was never used before. The Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah, Ma'ayin, Yatzala Metchila, Leishna Leicharva, Trivuas. They both would be awesome. Any questions? Guys, you clear? Everyone's clear? Yes? Yes, no, baby, we will go on. Okay, very good, very good. How do you know he's the Tan of the Mishnah? Dilma ad kan like Rabbi Yehuda beis hashlachin in beis abaloi. Ela me'ayin sheyatzim etchila amideis. Dilma asilan fule. Al me'ayin sheyatzim etchila. A me'ayin that is already used. Maybe the asilan pule afilu beis abal nami. Okay, now this is the next level question. How do you know Rabbi Yehuda would limit a already used fountain for the beis hashlachin? How do you know he would not extend it to the beis habal? Once I don't have to come into tircha, maybe he would extend it to the beis habal, meaning I feel a bit makam haravacha, even in a place where you would be a prophet, you could use it. All we heard from the other brisa was, that b'makam we wanted to hear, but beis hashlachin, you could use either well. Maybe by a beis habal, you can't use a well for the first time, but one that's not a well, a fountain. But once a fountain that's been established, you could. That's the Gemara asks. And then he can't be the Tan of our Mishnah. In Cain, says the Gemara, Mastisan Aman Tamaya. If that's the case, then who's the Tan of the Mishnah? Now, obviously, we have three Tanoim we're discussing it, right? We have three Tanoim. We have Rabbi Meir, Rabbi Yehuda, and Elazar ben Azariah. The only one that's possibly can fit is Rabbi Yehuda. Rabbi Meir, he clearly said a beis hashlach, beis habal also. Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah said once you can't use a well, you can't use a fountain that's never been used. Clearly, it can't be our Mishnah. The only one who could possibly be our Mishnah is Rabbi Yehuda. You want to extend it and say maybe it's even a bigger heter. Even b'makam beis habal, he will let you use a ma'ayin that's already established. Then we have no time in the Mishnah. So therefore, it makes no sense to say that. Okay. Ella Aman Tami Ella Rabbi Yehuda Loishna Ma'ayin Shiyatzim Etchila, whether it's ma'ayin that's being used for the first time, the Loishna Ma'ayin Shiyatzim Etchila, whether it's already been established, Beis Hashlachin in Dafka in a Makam Hefsid, yes, Beis Habal, not in a Makam Hefsid, low. See, guys, Taich Beis Hashlachin Beis Habal as Makam Hefsid, low Makam Hefsid. It clears up everything. You don't get the confusion of what type of field are we talking about. We want halacha, right? Beis Shlachin is a field that is a davar avud, davar nevad, and Beis Baal is not. That's the way to teach it, and it makes a lot of sense. So guys, so tell me, why do you go ahead and say a ma'ayin that you're using for the first time? To tell me the koyach Reb Meir that even there you could use the Beis Baal. That feel man gets mitchila mashkemin or feel saded by Baal. Okay, that's why we use it. Okay, now the Gemara is going to go off. The Gemara is going to go off and come back and bring in our Mishnah. We're going to meet where Chol Moed meets Hilchos Shabbos. We're all familiar. There's 40 malachas, chasam one. There's 39 malachas. Discussing the ones that to do with the field. We know there's the issa of being chayrish the field, going ahead and plowing the field, and there's an issa what of planting. Those are the obvious malachas, putting a plow in and planting. There are other things one can do that may be told us. What's watering a field? Watering a field, right? Watering a field is what is a tolda of zareya. It's a tolda of planting. Going ahead and smoothing down a field is, again, in the field is a tolda of chayrish. In the house, it's a tolda of zbona. We spoke this out in Masechta Shabbos. So what happens if you have a plant and you're accomplishing both things? You're putting water near the root. Is it an issa zriya? Is it an issa of charisha? Is it an issa of both? And somehow using this concept, this idea, we're going to get into Hilchos Chol Moed. Good, says the Gemara. Itmar, hamanachesh, person's weeding a field. You're moving the junk. V'hamashke mayim l'zriya b'Shabbos, and you are watering the zroyim for Shabbos. Now look at Rashi. This is important, guys. Mashke mayim b'zroyim, shezoyrik mayim. You're throwing the water. The ikrei ha'asavim, and the root of the grass. In other words, I ask you, go water your flowers. So what do? You take a hose and you go out and you sprinkle it in the air. You put a sprinkler system on your front lawn. Here, what he's doing is he's shooting the water into directly when the plant comes in contact with the ground. That's important. Yeah, the plant's coming in contact with the ground. Now we know within the Hilchos Shabbos to be chayev, you have to warn him exactly which malacha he's being over. So if a person is doing this, clearly he's in the wrong. The question, what wrong is he doing? Right? What exactly is he doing wrong? So Rabbi Omar, Mishum Chayrish. Rabbi says the Isser is what? Is Charisha. Rabbi says the Isser is you're doing an act to the ground, you're softening the earth. Yosef Omar, Mishum Zayreya. You're causing it to grow. Amar Rabbi who says Chayrish, Kavasi Didim Istabra, Ma Daka Shel Chayrish L'Ripuri Ara, just like it's the way, of Chayrish, of plowing to go ahead and soften the ground. Hainami, by watering your plant next to the ground, Merupe Aretz, it's going ahead wide and it is making the ground soft. Amar Yosef Kavasi Didim Istabra Al Zayreya, Ma Darka Shel Zayreya L'Tzmuche Peira, just like the Darka Zayreya is to cause the peri to grow. Achanami Matzmiach Peri, you're causing the peri to grow. Amalei Abayel Rabba, L'Didach Kasha, Rabbi Yosef Kasha, L'Didach Kasha, Mishum Chayrishim, Mishum Zareya Lo, Rabbi Yosef Kasha, Mishum Zareya, Mishum Chayrish Lo. Why are you guys being so obstinate? Why don't you say you're a double whammy over here? You're chayav for both, right? It makes sense. So why would you tell me, without looking at the Gemara Vayta, why would you tell me that you can only be chayav one? Logically, right? You can only be over one. The chitema kol heicha the ikatarti loy mechayav elachada. In football, if you do two things wrong, you're only chayav once, right? There are two. I've heard this many times. We have two penalties on the defense. One, holding. Two, roughing the passer. We will take roughing the passer. Okay? Now everyone understands it, right? Are you up, Ari? I think he's out. He's out? Okay, anyway.
I'm not out. My screen is frozen.
Okay,
I got it.
I give you a bracha. You should go ahead and the alcohol should have its effect of Shabbos on you as you wish.
Thank you.
I know it's a bracha l'mikuyim, so shleitei birchas hedjed kal beinecha. This is a Gemara we have.
I'll do my best to make that come true.
Okay, maybe I have to join you since Benji won't be there. Okay, anyway. Elachada What are you going to tell me? You only chayiv once. Rav Kahana. Okay, guys, what are you doing? You're pruning a tree and you need the wood. Now, guys, outside, look at me. When you prune a tree and you don't need the wood, what's the isser? It's Zayreya. Because by pruning the tree, you're improving the growth of the tree. What happens if you're not pruning the tree for the purpose of the tree, you're cutting it because you need the wood? That's an isser of kaitzer, right? So if you need both, and I'm over on both, I'll illustrate to you that what? Right? That not only will you have a holding penalty, you get 20 yards, the whole kit and caboodle. Says the Gemara, Zaymer v'tzarech le'etzim, chayiv shtayim. You can be chayiv twice. Achas b'shum naiteya, v'achas b'shum kaitzer. Says the Gemara, kasha, it's shver. Enachem, it's shver. It's a kasha on both Rabbi and kasha both on Rabbi Yosef. Rabbi said al schayrish, Rabbi Yosef said al zayreya. Now, so far again, somewhere, somehow, you know this is going to connect to Cholamoy. Esivei. If Rabbi Yosef who said Zoreya, l'Rabu to said Chayrish. See, guys, when you learn, you see what I just did? You guys, when you're learning on yourself, when you're not using the art scroll, right? This is what you should do. Esivei Rabbi Yosef who says what? Who says Zoreya, l'Rabu who says Chayrish. That keeps you going. Hamanachesh, someone's weeding. V'hamachape, and someone covers up. L'kelayim, he goes ahead and he's menachesh, he's weeding, and he covers up the kalayim, and it is speaking about kalayim over here, right? Even if you keep it there, even if you keep it there, the time it takes to grow 1/200 of its growth. That's why it's shayach zuriya b'kalayim, right? It's shayach. You just tell him menachesh mechapel l'kayim loike. What are you getting malchus? So you're getting malchus for what? For planting. Pashtus menachesh is by hoeing the kalayim, by weeding it out, you're letting it grow better, right, guys? What's menachesh? So you have kalayim, you're taking away the weeds, so it's going to grow better, correct? So therefore, clearly, that's weeding and not chrisha. That's the kasha on Rabbah. So bishlema that I hold that what? I hold that the tam is al zareya, then therefore it's shayach zriya b'kalayim. El didoch the amit mishum chayrish. Charisha b'kalayim yat asri is it also to be charisha b'kalayim is alissa. So therefore it's mistaba like Rabbi Yosef, not Rabbah. Amalei Rabbah told Rabbi Yosef mishum mekayim. The issa of menachesh is not zareya. It's the same issa what as Rabbi Akiva, keeping it, letting it grow. There's an issa of mekayim. Guys, this is the sugya of lav shein b'maisa. Lav shein b'maisa, like, but just letting it grow. What maisa are you doing? So we said by taking the earth and covering it up, that's a maisa. Right? When Rabbi Kiva first, you're telling me the Reish is speaking about keeping kalayim. We're first introduced to that in the Seifa. Rabbi Kiva says, Afa Mekayim, Mechlal we can infer the Tanakama, La Mishum Mekayim hu. Mechlal we can infer that what? That it's not. So it's not cool Rabbi Kiva. The whole thing is Rabbi Akiva. Umat Tam Ka'amar. And the end of the brisa is giving the explanation of the beginning of the brisa. What's the reason someone who weeds and someone covers up kalayim gets malchus? Not mishum zareya, but mishum mekayim. You know why? Even if someone keeps it around. My time to Rabbi Kiva, the Tanya, the pasuk says, "Sod chalei sisra kalayim, ein li ela zareya, mekayim enayim tamad loymar." Kalayim sod chalov. Rashi over here says, if you look at Rashi, the pasuk says kalayim sod chalov. The afagav dechsiv leisizra kalayim. It doesn't say sod kalayim lo. It says leisizra kalayim. Goyrin, you'll subtract the word v'darshim. We'll take out the word sadcha and we'll dashin loy kalayim loy kalayim mikol makom shechayavat levad loy. You should not have any kalayim in any place in Mevatlet. So using cut and paste, we're going to go ahead. Rashi Makas doesn't say this way, but over here he's saying you're cutting and pasting, or we're actually cutting. So bottom line is, so far we haven't met Moed Katan yet. So therefore, we have a pshat going over machloikis between Rabbi and Rabbi Yosef. If you're watering a plant for the purpose of the close to the plant, to the ground, Rabbi says you're chayav for charisha, Rabbi Yosef says you're chayav for tzariya. Abai says, well, you're not chayav for both. We've proven Zaymeir v'koitzi you're chayav for both. Rabbi is asking Rabbi Yosef, why in the world would you mechayav for weeding kalayim if not for Zayreya like me, not like charisha like you? And Rabbi is avoiding the kasha by saying there is no Zareya here. It's all Mekayim. It's all one Isser of keeping Kalayim, the amount of time it takes in the field to grow 1/200 of its growth. Okay, that's Mekayim. Now, I told you 1/200 of its growth, that's to create Kalayim. It could be that there's Kalayim here already and you're keeping it. I'm not sure, just to be clear. The easiest way is you're keeping it. But again, I'm not sure. Says the Gemara Vaita. Okay. Tanan, Mashkin Beis HaShlachim. Oh, now we know why we're bringing this in. Mashkin Beis HaShlachim. You can go ahead and irrigate a Beis HaShlachim in Moed Ubashvias, and you can even irrigate it in the Shemitah year. Now, Bishleim in Moed Mishum Tirchahu Uvmakim Peseda Shayir Rabbanon. In the place of Peseda, the Rabbanon were not, since there's not a Tircha Yisera over here, they weren't Goyris. El Shvias, like the Shemitah year, Bein L'Mandam Mishum Zayreya, whether irrigating a field, making it wet, is al zareya. Ubein leman da'ama mishum chayrish, zariya charisha b'shviyas mishari, is permitted to go ahead and do zariya or charisha. So now, silate rabba, guys. In other words, it's a shemitah year. There's no chalamoid problem. The only problem is working the field in the shemitah year, doing certain malachas that are not permitted. Good. So now you got a problem. Loi Rabbi Yosef, who says al zariya, by going ahead and irrigating the field in the Shemitah year, you're causing things to grow. Loit Rabbah, that you're making the field softer, that's Charisha. So, and we both know Chayreyesh and Zoreya are both not permitted in the Shemitah year. So how, based upon those two pshatim of two Tamroyim, how would they learn Pshat in our Mishnah? How would they learn Pshat in our Mishnah? And our Mishnah is a Tana. So that's it's a kasha on them. Abaya, the Talmud of both of them. Guys, it's Geshmak. Abaya was the Talmud of Rabbah, and it was the Talmud of Yosef, right? So he's now coming to answer up his Rabbeim. He's coming to answer Rabbi. He's coming to answer his other Rebbe. B'shvias bizman hazeh. It's speaking about Shemitah in our time and age. For Rebbe and it's the Tana Rebbe, the Tanya Rebbe Omer. B'zeh devar Shemitah shamut. It says when it says Hashmitah shamut, b'shtei Shemitas kasem medaber. It's speaking about two Shemitas. Acha Shemitah karka, being shamat, slipping away and not working the field. Yacha Shemitas ksafim, and your loan being slipped away. Bisman shatem mishamit karka. When there's a din of Shemitas karka, atem mishamit ksafim. Then there's a din of Shemitas ksafim that you can't collect a loan. With man shiyatem mishamit karka, when there's no din of Shemitah karka, you have to mishamit ksafim. So therefore, it's the Rabbanon, and Bisman hazeh will be permitted. So that's the one teretz for Rabbi, Abaya's teretz, to get Rabbi and Rabbi Yosef off the hook, that since it's Bisman hazeh, the Shemitah year, it's only the Rabbanon. And Rabbi Amar, if you tame Rabbanon, you can even say it's the Rabbanon, right? Not who says that the Shemitahs would both be in vogue. Avos Asar Rachmana, the Torah only asks Avos, told us Le Asar Rachmana, the told us not. So we're going to see Bez Hashem on Motzei Shabbos. We're going to stop here. Just the Av Malach of Charisha Zasa, the Av Zuriya, letting the water go and softening it clearly is a told of Chayrish. Going ahead and letting the water go on the plant is Zikr, a told of Zayreya. So Rabbi answers the question very geschmackly. You want to know why it's not a problem on the Shemitah year for opening the canal? Because since it's only a tolda, it's not us in the Shemitah year. Again, I thank everyone.